Away from the media circus in Brisbane, a battle for votes is also being fought in regional Queensland. That's where the Nationals Senator Barnaby Joyce has been focusing his efforts. He was in Rockhampton when I spoke with him earlier. Barnaby Joyce, you've been travelling around rural and regional areas in this first week. What's the number one issue people have been raising with you?
Well, the big issue that people have is security of their economic future. That comes in a number of ways. It's making sure that the mining industry remains prosperous. It's making sure that on the agricultural side there's no more impediments put on the way the cane farmers work, the way the people in land work, so that they can actually work their land and make a dollar without the government crawling all over them. Away from that, people have a sense of concern, the way Julia Gillard endorsed Kevin Rudd, offered a trust to Kevin Rudd, then got rid of Kevin Rudd. People feel that was deceitful, and they don't like deceit, especially from people who are supposed to be close to them. On other issues, infrastructure, health, they always come into play.
You mentioned infrastructure. As the opposition's infrastructure spokesman, you can't have been very happy with Tony Abbott's announcement this week to cut $400 million worth of state infrastructure funding.
Well, obviously we've got to deal with the debt. People understand that Australia has this massive debt. You know, we are borrowing and have been borrowing $100 million a day, and just this year we're going to be borrowing $150 million a day. If we don't get our debt under control, nothing else matters. When they talk about cutting money, it's actually talking about cutting borrowed money. It's not our money. We'd have to borrow the money. And we've got to stop borrowing money in the way we're borrowing it, because we'll get ourselves into so much strife.
Does that help people, though, when they're trying to get into a hospital, or they're trying to move in traffic on a busy road, or the road that they're on is in a state of disrepair?
We will certainly have a policy that actually deals with infrastructure, and we'll come up with mechanisms for financing that infrastructure. But I must admit and be honest with you, the debt that the Labor Party has put us in puts incredible impediments on this. They've blown the money, and we've got the debt, and we've got a massive problem, and we've got to try and fix it. And fixing debt is a hard thing. Any housewife, any family can tell you that getting the debt is easy, paying it off is mighty hard.
Let's move on to climate change. The Prime Minister has today promised a citizens' assembly to ask everyday Australians about an emissions trading scheme. Would you support that level of consultation?
This is loopy. You know, come on down, Tutti Frutti, you've won a prize. You get to select Australia's climate change policy. Well, this random selection of people as we walk along the street. Welcome, madam. You get to decide which way Australia's climate change policy is going to go.
So they should only be asking the experts?
Well, it's just the random selection of 150 people in the Citizens' Assembly. I'll tell you where you'll find 150 people. It's called the Parliament House of Australia. And they're actually selected by the Australian people. And I know this is a naive view, but how about we use the multi-billion-dollar piece of infrastructure called the Australian Parliament and use the people actually selected by the Australian populace to determine the policy?
So the government should lead without consultation?
But look, there's consultation, and there's theatre, and then there's absolute rubbish. We've been down this path before, Jessica. Remember the 2020 forum, the 1,000 people in Parliament House for the day? This is an old trick of the Labor Party. What happened from that 2020 forum? Nothing, I think, is the answer to that. You can have consultation, and by saying to the people, this is our policy, we'll go to the Australian people with this at the electorate, and if you don't like it, don't vote for us. That's real consultation.
Senator Joyce, should you have consulted with Tony Abbott before you floated your plan this week to give Indigenous workers big tax breaks? Tony Abbott says it's not coalition policy.
I'm happy to talk about this. First of all, it's not about just Aboriginals, so it's got to be really clear on this. It's for any individual who works in a remote area. This has been policy of the National Party for years.
But it's not coalition policy.
Policy of the National Party, and it's something that we're going to continue to fight for, and we'll continue to try and drive forward for.
But how can you take it on a campaign and promise it to people when it's not coalition policy, and therefore wouldn't come to pass if the coalition was voted into government?
Look, I put this in my maiden speech. I clearly stated it was National Party policy. I've clearly stated that I'll continue to fight for it. I'm not going to stand back and see people who've been left behind in the remote areas of our nation and just ignore them. We've got to try and deliver a better outcome for them. And it's not just for Indigenous people, it's for the nurses, for the doctors, for the workers, for the ringers, for the people who deserve some sort of motivation to move to the more disparate corners of our state. and also to drive the economic development of our state.
Barnaby Joyce, we've run out of time, but thank you for your time.
My pleasure, Jessica.